Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up the archives on a single battle that wasn't just a victory.
No, not at all.
It was a genuine inflection point in human conflict. I'm talking about the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631.
Right.
If you want to know when the blueprint for modern warfare was first drafted, this is really the moment.
It is. It's a brutal, decisive clash during the 30 Years' War, and we're diving deep to understand the tactical genius behind it all.
The genius that literally changed the map of Europe.
And that's our mission for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We're not just reciting names and dates here.
Yeah.
We want to get at the why. Why did this, this invincible army of the Catholic League suddenly shatter against these new arrivals?
Yeah, set the scene for us.
It was September 17th, 1631, near Leipzig, in what is now Saxony.
Yeah.
And it was just this dramatic showdown.
A showdown between what, exactly?
Between the iron rigidity of the old way of war and the flexible, fire-intensive future.
Okay, let's unpack that setup. To really understand the stakes, you have to remember the context of the 1630s.
You do?
The entire conflict felt like a runaway train for the Habsburg Emperor and the Catholic cause.
Absolutely. German Protestantism was on the ropes, financially exhausted, and, frankly, militarily humiliated.
So the arrival of the Swedes was a huge gamble.
It was an all-in bet. And it was led by this highly charismatic, highly motivated commander, King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden.
The Line of the North.
That's the one. He positioned himself as the champion for the Protestant faith. He brought with him the combined Swedish and allied Saxon army.
Which was a pretty big force.
It was about 40,150 troops. But, and this is a big bet, but while they had the numbers, their allies, the Saxons, were famously shaky.
And who were they facing?
The Imperial Catholic League army.
Yeah.
It was commanded by Johann Circles, the Count of Tilly.
And Tilly was not a pushover.
Oh, not at all. He was a veteran commander who had been, frighteningly successful for decades.
His troops, about 31,400 of them, were the traditional disciplined core of Catholic power.
They had a reputation for being invincible. They really did.
Yeah. And Tilly had spent 30 years perfecting that old way of fighting.
He was relying on the established doctrine, for sure. The sources make it clear that the momentum of the entire war rested right on his shoulders.
And until this day, that had been a pretty light burden.
It's very light.
But momentum, as we know, can pivot instantly. Breitenfeld was the first major Protestant victory of the war. It shattered that aura of invincibility.
He did.
But why didn't Tilly see this coming? I mean, surely a commander that successful had seen innovations before. Why did these tactics prove so devastating?
That's the crux of the deep dive right there. Tilly was operating under the assumption that mass and depth equaled resilience.
The old way of thinking.
The old way. He relied on the traditional structure, primarily the Spanish-style tercios.
So paint a picture for us. What is a tercio?
Imagine a massive, dense block of infantry, sometimes 10 or even 12 ranks deep.
Wow.
They were defensive behemoths. They had a core of pikemen to resist cavalry, surrounded by musketeers on the flanks.
So they were basically slow, heavily armored tanks.
That's a great way to put it. They took forever to turn or maneuver.
And what did Gustavus Adolphus field instead? We hear about this Swedish brigade. What did that actually look like on the field?
The Swedish brigade was a radical departure. Instead of 10 or 12 ranks, they typically formed only 6 ranks deep.
6. That sounds minor, but I'm guessing it wasn't.
It fundamentally changed everything. Everything. It meant they could field the same number of soldiers in a formation that was much wider, much shallower.
And much quicker to pivot.
Exactly. This shift from depth to width was the key to what we now call modern linear tactics.
So the goal wasn't just flexibility, it was about maximizing firepower.
Precisely.
I mean, if you have 10 rows of musketeers, only the front 2 or 3 can realistically shoot at the enemy.
Right.
So if you cut that depth in half, you're doubling the number of muskets actually engaged at any one time.
You've got it. And this is where the mechanism of innovation comes in. The Swedish 6-rank formation allowed for what they called salvo fire.
Or rolling fire, I've heard it called.
Right. Rolling fire. The first 3 ranks would step forward, fire a volley together, and then peel off to reload behind the others.
And the next ranks would step up immediately.
Immediately fire their own volley. It created this near-continuous sheet of lead on the enemy. Just a sustained high volume of fire.
That difference in the rate of fire alone must have been just, well, it's demoralizing.
It was. The Imperial troops Using older, heavier muskets in those deep formations, they just couldn't answer back fast enough.
And there was a logistical element too, wasn't there?
A crucial one. The Swedes had standardized paper cartridges. No fumbling with powder flasks and separate wads.
So it was all pre-measured, powder and shot.
Exactly. That simple improvement boosted their reload time significantly. But the final tactical punch came from their artillery.
Now wait, artillery usually means large, slow siege cannons. How did they integrate that into mobile infantry lines?
Gustavus Adolphus introduced these highly mobile, standardized 3-pounder field guns.
Light enough to be moved easily.
Light enough to be pulled by a single horse, or even a couple of men. And he distributed these small cannons directly within the infantry units.
So he treated them almost like large muskets.
That's the idea. They could fire high-explosive canister shot at point-blank range, which was absolutely devastating to the dense, slow-moving Tercios.
So they were facing rapid infantry fire and mobile, high-explosive rounds at the same time.
A terrible combination to face.
That combination, the flexibility, the rate of fire, the integrated artillery, it sounds almost insurmountable. Let's see how this played out when the battle actually started.
Well, the battle started off looking exactly like Tilly expected it to.
How so?
The Imperial Army launched a massive cavalry charge, and, as predicted, the unstable Saxon flank, the lesser-trained allies, collapsed almost immediately.
They just routed.
They routed, throwing the entire Protestant flank into chaos. For an hour, the battle was almost lost.
Tilly must have been smiling.
You have to mention he was, thinking the old ways had won again.
So that must have been a terrifying moment for the Swedes. What allowed them to hold with their allies fleeing and their entire right wing exposed?
Discipline. Training. And that superior flexibility we talked about.
So instead of panic, though.
Instead of panicking, the Swedish forces performed an incredibly complex maneuver. All under fire. They didn't just stand there, they pivoted their entire army.
Wow.
Using those shallower formations, they executed a flanking maneuver to protect their exposed wing. They repositioned units to face the Imperials trying to exploit the gap.
And Tilly's troops just couldn't match that speed.
They couldn't. The Tercios, designed to just push forward slowly, couldn't quickly shift their mass to attack this new, rearranged Swedish line.
They were too slow to capitalize on the Saxon route.
Exactly. And when the Imperial forces finally engaged the repositioned Swedes, they were met with that relentless, continuous volley fire.
And the grape shot from the mobile 3-pounders?
Combined with the grape shot, it was a grinder. The Imperial infantry was being systematically mowed down.
And their cavalry charges.
Disrupted before they could even reach the Swedish pike lines. The sources really emphasize that the sheer, sustained volume of lead just broke the enemy's will.
The outcome wasn't just a defeat for Tilly, it was a physical annihilation of his army.
It was.
Let's look at those casualty figures again because they really illustrate the true imbalance created by these innovations.
Tilly's forces were absolutely shattered. We're talking approximately 7,600 killed or wounded on the field.
And that's not all?
No. Plus another 6,000 captured. That's nearly half his army gone in a single afternoon.
And if you compare that to the Swedish and Saxon losses,
the disparity is stark. They lost a total of only around 4,000. The battle was a demonstration that modern tactics could inflict far greater damage while suffering significantly less.
A statistical military revolution.
It really was.
That casualty imbalance alone is staggering proof that the old doctrine was faulty. Let's pivot now to the so what. Beyond the battlefield, why does Breitenfeld resonate so deeply?
The immediate consequence was panic in the Catholic League. This single defeat decisively broke the momentum of the 30 Years' War.
Tilly was forced to retreat.
And the road into southern Germany, which had been closed to the Protestants, was suddenly wide open. Gustavus Adolphus used this to advance deep into the Catholic heartland,
forcing the emperor to recall his only other major commander, Wallenstein.
The one he'd previously sidelined, yes. So this single battle secured a few key objectives.
What were they?
Well, first, militarily, it proved the Swedish model was superior, forcing all of Europe to, take notes.
And politically?
Politically, it was crucial for the long-term preservation of German Protestantism against Habsburg dominance. It ensured the religious map of Europe would not be purely Catholic.
And third, it permanently changed Sweden's status.
Absolutely. It secured Sweden's emergence as a great European power. Before Breitenfeld, they were seen as a capable but regional Baltic state. After Breitenfeld, military officers from across Europe, French, English observers, they flocked to the Swedish army to study the linear formation and the fire discipline.
So this wasn't just a military victory.
It was a template. It immediately became the gold standard for armies worldwide, paving the way for the age of drilled professional armies.
So, if we synthesize everything from the depth of the Tercio to the speed of the Swedish brigade to the mobile artillery, Breitenfeld wasn't just a battle.
Yeah.
It was a proof of concept. It proved that flexibility, rapid maneuver, and sustained firepower were superior to traditional mass and rigidity.
Right. The sources confirmed this was basically the death certificate for the old way of war.
It demonstrates how doctrine and organization can matter more than sheer numbers or even technology.
And it took a genius commander like Gustavus Adolphus to synthesize existing tools into a revolutionary system. A system that effectively ended the dominance of the old imperial power structure overnight.
So a quick recap on the key takeaways for you listening. We saw the tactical innovation of the Swedish brigade and salvo fire.
The resulting military imbalance, which you can see in those catastrophic imperial casualties.
And the profound geopolitical consequence of Sweden emerging as a continental power, effectively saving the Protestant cause in Germany.
And this leaves us with a final thought to consider.
Go on.
When you look at history, whether it's military, business, or technology, how often does a subtle innovation in organizational structure,
Like the way you align your people.
exactly, like reducing ranks from 10 to 6, how often does that completely redefine the strategic balance of power? And what does that tell you about the importance of being able to pivot quickly, even if tradition argues for stability and mass?
Food for thought for your next high-stakes challenge. Dive into the history of the 30 Years' War, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Today, we are marching straight into the 17th century. We're going to analyze one of the most game-changing battles in European history.
And the mind behind it all.
Exactly. Gustavus Adolphus, the King of Sweden, the Line of the North. But we're not here just to recount a battle.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into the tactical system that won the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631.
And this is so crucial because Breitenfeld wasn't just another victory, it was. It was the moment military theory kind of hit the reset button.
The reset button.
Yeah. I mean, before Gustavus, armies were all about rigidity, sheer defensive bulk. Our goal is to really understand how he figured out how to maximize mobility, flexibility, and firepower all at once.
Making an army that, on paper, looked weaker, but was actually unbeatable.
That's it, exactly.
So our core mission for you, the listener, is to unpack the specific groundbreaking changes Gustavus made to the core building block of any army, the infantry.
Right. How did he take this standard formation that had dominated Europe for decades and just rewrite the whole playbook?
To really appreciate that, we have to start with what everyone else was doing, the status quo.
Mm-hmm. And that was warfare defined by things like the Spanish Tercio. You know, these deep, really cumbersome blocks of pike and musketeers.
Designed for defense, not speed.
Not at all. They were there to absorb punishment.
So when we talk about that defensive bulk, let's get specific. What did a typical imperial or Catholic League formation actually look like?
You were looking at formations that were just incredibly deep. We're talking 20 to 30 ranks of men deep.
30 ranks.
Yeah. The sheer physical weight of that formation was meant to just stop a cavalry charge dead in its tracks.
But the trade-off must have been immense.
Oh, huge. Only the first 2 or 3 ranks could even fire their weapons. So you've got, 90% of your men just standing there.
Basically just pushing from behind. That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to give an order in the middle of a fight.
Forget about it. Movement was like molasses.
So it's slow.
It was nearly impossible under pressure. That rigidity, it caused 2 major problems. 1, you could be easily outflanked, and 2, the logistical drag was massive.
Okay, so that's the scene. Now let's get into the key change. Gustavus looks at this 30-rank behemoth and does what?
He basically chops it down by 5/6? He deployed his infantry in much, much shallower formations, only 5 to 6 ranks deep.
That is a tectonic shift.
It really is. He's fundamentally changing the whole purpose of the formation. It's not about passive absorption anymore. It's about active, immediate firepower.
But wait, being only 5 or 6 ranks deep, doesn't that make you incredibly vulnerable? I mean, surely there's a psychological advantage to seeing a 30-deep block of men coming at you. This sounds like a huge risk.
It was calculated risk, for sure, but he balanced that risk with training and firepower, which we'll get to. He traded that defensive resilience for offensive capability.
So the idea was to deliver punishment faster than the enemy could take it?
Exactly. Don't wait for the punch, throw the first one. The old way was about survival. The Swedish way was about disruption.
And he didn't just change to the depth. He reorganized the units themselves, right? Brigades were made smaller and more flexible?
Yes, and this is where you get this really fascinating historical echo. The structure he used was modeled somewhat on the Roman cohort size.
The Roman cohort, so smaller, more self-contained units.
Right. He didn't just copy the number of men, he copied the concept of internal flexibility, of delegated command.
And what does that mean tactically, that connection to the cohort?
It's crucial. The Roman legion worked because its cohorts could act semi-independently. Gustavus applied that same idea. His smaller brigades could react to local threats on their own, instantly.
Without waiting for orders to filter down through that massive static block.
Exactly. It meant the Swedish line could plug a gap or exploit an opening in a way the imperial forces just couldn't even comprehend. They were just too slow to react.
So they're more agile. The next logical step is figuring out how to make that agility lethal. How did the Swedes maximize their power in that slim 5-rank formation?
Training. It all came down to rigorous training in rapid, coordinated salvo firing.
The salvo?
Right. And the shallow formation was key. With 5 ranks, all 5 could fire in really quick succession through a technique called counter-marching. You're maximizing the density of lead hitting the enemy.
So he basically weaponized the firing cycle. He took a slow weapon, the matchlock musket, and turned it into a shock tool just by increasing the speed.
Absolutely. The result of that training was devastating firepower. This wasn't just harassing fire, it created a wall of lead that could stop a cavalry charge cold.
So the muskets were disrupting the charge before the pikes even had to do their job.
That's the idea. Shatter the enemy's momentum first.
Okay, so moving from the formation size to how it actually moved on the battlefield, the Swedes had a huge geometric advantage there too.
They did. They used linear formations, which were much wider and shallower than the old blocks, and they were arranged so units could quickly pivot and extend their flanks if they needed to.
Like a door swinging on a hinge.
A pretty good analogy, yeah. That flexibility allowed them to react to the flow of the battle in real time.
Now that sounds geometrically complex, especially under fire. What stopped the line from just buckling in the middle when the flanks were moving?
Well, again, it comes back to discipline and those smaller brigades. The unit commanders could manage the pivot on a local level, and because the formation was linear, it could wheel much more smoothly. There wasn't the internal friction you'd get in a 20-deep block trying to do the same thing.
Is there a specific moment at Breitenfeld where this really paid off?
Oh, absolutely. The turning point of the battle. The Saxon retreat.
Gustavus's allies.
His allies who fled, leaving the Swedish left flank completely exposed. The Imperials saw their chance and tried to roll up the line.
And their deep formations couldn't adjust fast enough.
Couldn't adjust. But the Swedish brigades on that flank performed this rapid, controlled pivot, stabilizing the line just long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Their flexibility literally saved the army.
Which brings us to what might be the most brilliant part of all this. Combined arms. You can't talk about Gustavus without how his musketeers and cavalry worked together.
It's the true differentiator. He integrated them into this terrifying cycle.
How did it work?
Well, traditional cavalry might do the caracole right up, shoot their pistols right away. Gustavus trained his force to charge home with the sword. For shock.
And the musketeers supported that.
They set it up. The musketeers would deliver a huge coordinated salvo to stagger the enemy line, create confusion, create gaps.
And right into those gaps.
The cavalry would charge before the enemy could rally. Then as the cavalry wheeled away, the infantry was already reforming for another volley.
Wow, that just sounds exhausting for the enemy. You get a wave of fire, then instantly a wave of steel, then more fire. No time to breathe.
That's the whole point. This integration, it just multiplied the shock effect. It was a rapid 1-2 punch of coordinated charges and gunfire that the old defensive blocks just couldn't handle.
They could absorb one or the other, but not both in quick succession.
Exactly. And he even attached small groups of musketeers called commanded shot directly to the cavalry units to give them their own mobile fire support.
So beyond the frontline tactics, what about backup? Reserves. How did he use them differently?
It was about control, not just having more bodies. In the old armies, reserves were often just the last 10 ranks of the main block.
So slow to deploy.
Very slow. Gustavus used his reserves and second-line troops as a flexible tool. They were trained specifically to move quickly to plug gaps and support the front line as it maneuvered.
So it's a system built not just to absorb a hit, but to immediately counterpunch and keep the tempo up.
That's it, exactly. The battle was fluid. The reserves were constantly in motion, stabilizing a breakthrough here, launching a local counterattack there. It meant the Swedes always kept the initiative.
Okay, let's pull all of this together for the listener. We've got shallower ranks, salvo fire, linear flexibility, combined arms, and active reserves. What's the final result? What was the Swedish army in 1631?
It was a genuinely modern military force for its time. It was highly disciplined, incredibly mobile, and spectacularly lethal, all because they chose agility over simple mass.
They could concentrate fire, move quickly, and stay coordinated under extreme pressure.
Skills their opponents just didn't have.
And this all came together at Breitenfeld. It wasn't a fluke. It was a systematic demonstration of a superior system.
Without a doubt. These reforms are what greatly contributed to their decisive victory at Breitenfeld. The battle proved that mobility and focused firepower beat passive bulk every time, and it set a new standard in military tactics that would influence armies for the next 150 years.
A huge takeaway. Gustavus showed the world that speed wasn't just an option, it was a weapon. So I want you to think about this. Gustavus optimized his system by reducing bulk and increasing agility. So my question for you is this. What parallel modern-day examples can you think of outside of war, where that same principle of radical streamlining and flexibility proved to be the key to success against older, bigger, more rigid organizations?
It's a great question. Think about system efficiency. It could be the shift from massive, centralized factories to modular, just-in-time production. Or even in business, the move from rigid, hierarchical companies to smaller, cross-functional, agile teams. The lesson is the same. The deepest structure is often the slowest. And efficiency, when you couple it with maneuverability, is the ultimate force multiplier. Thanks for diving deep with us. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take that dense source material that, most people would probably run from, and we boil it down into the key insights. Today we're looking at military history, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. We're asking a pretty cold, hard question, really. How do you actually measure a disaster in numbers? I mean, when a historian says a battle was a decisive victory, what does that really look like on the ground in terms of human cost? So for you, we've gone through excerpts that focus just on the casualty list from one of the most important battles of the 30 Years' War, the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631. We are not going to rehash all the tactics. Our goal is to unpack the specific stats, the killed, the wounded, the captured, to see why this one day was so final. Okay, let's get into it.
What's fascinating here is that the sources really do give us the exact ingredients for this catastrophe.
Right.
So Breitenfeld fought in September 1631. It was just outside Leipzig. And this wasn't just another fight. This was the major showdown.
The main
event, exactly. Between the Imperial Catholic League, led by the famous Count of Tilly.
A legend in his own right.
Oh, absolutely. And on the other side, you have this Protestant coalition, the Swedes under King Gustavus Adolphus, and they're fighting with the Saxons under Elector John George III.
The stakes here feel astronomical. I mean, Tilly's army was the dominant force in the war up to this point, right?
They were the gold standard. They had been winning. And Gustavus Adolphus, he was the brilliant newcomer, the foreign king. If Tilly had won at Breitenfeld, the whole Swedish intervention might have just, fizzled out right there.
A huge what if.
A massive one. And the sources, they're all unanimous. They label this a decisive, just a devastating victory for the Swedish Saxon side. But, as you said, even winners pay a high price back then.
Sure.
So to understand what decisive really means, we have to look at the map, the actual stark difference in the numbers.
And to do that, you have to start with the loser.
You have to. We have to look at Tilly's imperial forces and just grasp the sheer magnitude of what happened to them.
And the numbers we have in the source material for them, they are genuinely startling. When we look at the scale of this defeat, it's so much more than a retreat. It feels like the structural annihilation of an entire army.
That's the perfect word for it, annihilation. Because our sources, they break the imperial losses down into two really critical categories, and they tell very different parts of the story.
Okay.
So the first category is the immediate combat loss. The men killed or wounded right there in the heat of battle. The Imperial Catholic League suffered approximately 7,600 soldiers killed or wounded.
7,600. Just stop there for a second. That's a huge number of experienced fighters to lose in a single day. Any general would have a terrible time replacing that corps of men.
A terrible time, absolutely. But here's the thing. If that was the only number, Tilly might have, pulled back, regrouped what was left, and been back in the fight in a few months.
Okay, so that's not the whole story.
Not even close.
No.
The number that defines the completeness of the defeat is in that second category.
Yeah.
An additional 6,000 imperial soldiers were captured.
Right, and this is what I really want to dig into, because I know the 6,000 captures matter, but just looking at the number 7,600 killed and wounded it sounds like a bigger immediate loss. So why does that capture figure matter so much more?
That is the essential question. It really is. When you have 7,600 men down, it's a massive blow, of course, but the army structure can survive. The remaining units often hold together, they retreat in good order, and they save crucial institutional knowledge.
You mean like experienced officers, the guys who actually know how to run things?
Exactly. The non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, the regimental standards, the whole command structure. But a capture rate of 6,000 on top of the other losses, that tells you the command structure completely dissolved.
So it's chaos.
It's total chaos. It means panic, a complete disintegration of the fighting formations. It means soldiers are throwing down their weapons and surrendering in huge groups, not fighting it out unit by unit. When a whole regiment is captured, you don't just lose the men, you lose the entire unit's memory.
So you're losing more than just bodies. You're losing 6,000 men who know the drills, who know how to march, who know their officers by sight. You lose all that accumulated experience.
Precisely. You lose the manpower capital, as you put it. And that loss is exponential. These weren't fresh recruits. Many were veterans. When you take them off the board, you don't just need new bodies, you need years to train them, to integrate them. You can't just, print new veteran sergeants in the 17th century.
It turns a bad day into an operational crisis.
That's it, exactly. A defeat becomes a crisis.
Yeah.
So you combine the figures, 13,600 men gone, just like that, through death, injury, or capture. Tilly didn't just lose a battle, he lost the functional core of his entire army.
And the sources say that wasn't even the end of it.
No, not at all. The sources are very clear on this. They specifically mention further losses occurring during the subsequent retreat and pursuit.
Tell us more about that. What does that cascading effect look like for an army that's already broken?
Well, a disciplined retreat is one of the hardest things to do in war. A panicked rout, which is what this was, with the Swedes right on their heels. It's a disaster multiplier.
So these further losses aren't just more soldiers.
No, it's men dying of exposure, it's desertion, and crucially, it's the loss of all their material, the baggage train, the food, the cannons. Soldiers just abandoned it all to run faster. Those logistical losses, they aren't in the main tally, but they cripple any chance of the army reforming itself quickly.
That is just staggering. You've essentially taken a major player off the board for a long time. You've got an enemy army that literally cannot act as an army anymore. Which brings us to the other side of the coin, because we have to look at what this incredible victory cost the winners.
Yes.
And when we shift focus to the Swedish Saxon army, the disparity in the numbers it's what makes this such an anomaly for the era. They achieved all that destruction while keeping their own army almost completely intact.
And that's the whole point about operational viability. For the winners, for Gustavus Adolphus and John George I, their total losses, so killed or wounded, were estimated at around 4,000.
4,000, okay, so let's just compare that. 4,000 losses for the winners versus over 13,600 for the losers. And that's before you count all the guys who ran away or the supplies they lost.
The gap is just enormous. It's a difference of nearly 10,000 fighting men.
That's not just a win.
No, that gap is the statistical and, frankly, the military definition of a decisive victory. This wasn't a Pyrrhic victory where both sides limp away. The Swedish Saxon army, by only losing 4,000 men, kept its strength, its discipline, and its operational tempo.
And that operational tempo, that ability to keep moving, to press the advantage, that's everything.
It is everything. The Swedish doctrine was all about aggressive, rapid movement. Losing only 4,000 men meant they didn't have to stop, they didn't have to wait for reinforcements or spend months reorganizing. They could immediately turn that victory into a strategic advance.
So they go right back on the offensive.
Immediately. They start chasing the remnants of Killy's army, they start seizing imperial fortresses, all without missing a beat.
And meanwhile, the Imperials are just gone.
They are fundamentally removed from the game for the foreseeable future. You can't just absorb a loss like that and keep fighting. They have to spend months, maybe even a year or more, on a massive recruiting and retraining effort just to build new regiments from scratch.
It's an imbalance that gives Gustavus Adolphus total control.
Total control. He gets to decide where and when the next battles are fought. because he's the only one with a fully functioning army left on the field.
So if we connect this all back to the 30 Years' War as a whole, this is where the numbers on a single day translate directly into the grand strategy of the war.
Indeed. I mean, the casualty figures themselves just scream dominance. The incredible depletion of the Imperial army, especially that loss of structure you see in the 6,000 captured, and you combine that with the Swedes' relatively low casualties, well, that directly leads to their military dominance for the next phase of the war.
You can literally point to the data, specifically that mass capture number, and say, this right here is the moment the Imperial war machine broke.
And that break wasn't just physical. It created a psychological shockwave. The long-term consequence, which the sources all agree on, is that this victory cemented Swedish power. It allowed them to march deep into southern Germany, which completely changed the map of the war.
And forced the Imperials onto the back foot for years.
A desperate, expensive, years-long period of just trying to recover, just trying to field an army that could even challenge the Swedes again. The ability of Gustavus Adolphus to just keep going, coupled with the systemic failure of Killy's army shown by those captures, gave the Swedes a huge psychological edge for years to come.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? I think it means that when you're looking at history, especially military history, you have to look past the simple headline of who won. You have to ask for the breakdown of the cost. Breitenfeld was decisive, not because the Swedes were just better fighters, but because that loss ratio, and especially that catastrophic collapse, symbolized by those 6,000 captured men, it made rebuilding the Imperial army impossible in the short term.
It's the difference between a really bad day and a complete institutional collapse.
Right.
And when you understand that difference, that organizational failure represented by mass capture, it just gives you a much more nuanced view of how power works in wartime. It's not always about heroism. A lot of the time, it's about the cold, hard, logistical reality.
The granular data really is everything. It tells the real story. We can't just look at the total killed. We have to look at the killed versus the captured, because that number, the captured, that's where you see the chaos, the collapse of morale, and the deep strategic impact of just one day of fighting.
Absolutely. That number, 6,000, represents the lost leaders, the lost experience, and really the shattered confidence in an army that until that morning, it seemed invincible. It's the story of an army that just stopped working.
And that is where we'll end our deep dive into the numbers of Breitenfeld. Here's something for you to think about as you read about other so-called decisive battles. How often was it a high capture rate rather than just a high death toll that really earned a battle its place in history? We'll let you explore that one on your own. Until next time.